Welcome to the last part of our session on Australian orchids. I hope you, as you're going through, have been able to perhaps match the orchids as we go with someone that you know, or perhaps a situation that you have personally been in, either in the past or presently, where perhaps the orchid's healing could have been really useful or would currently be very useful. And I'm hoping that that is helping you to remember some of these orchids. So we're going to start this part of the session with fringed mantis orchid. And this is a great example of an orchid that to me seems like it's dancing. When I've seen pictures of these orchids, I haven't personally seen it, unfortunately. This is one I'd love to see. There's some people that have done a really beautiful job of having like lots of different pictures of the orchids from different angles, and it makes it look like it's in the middle of this dance, which is just stunning. Similar to the green orchid, it has those kind of long antennas. It's otherworldly, really, isn't it? So this is a living essence orchid, and it's been used for when people feel like they have power over another, when they're privy to personal information about somebody. So they use that personal information for their own ends. So they use it in manipulation of others or a situation, and it ends up being a method of control, a method of power play between people through gossiping, basically. And the focus then, because that's a source of power, the focus then becomes, how can I gain more information about others to use for my own means? And then that becomes a really unhealthy focus in their lives. So this is for individuals who are perhaps almost to the point of obsession about other people's affairs, so what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then taking that information and using it strategically to gain power over others. So the lesson then is in kind of understanding that that power play is not a healthy place to be in, and that ultimately, even though in the present time it may be getting this individual what they want, long term it does not lead to happiness, it does not lead to satisfaction, it does not lead to inner peace, it does not lead usually to positive outcomes long term. And so coming out of that illusion of power and control and moving into a space of understanding that our intentions and the way that we interact and the way that we show our humanity is through truth, is through speaking our truth and also being centered in our truth. And benevolence then comes in to play here. So choosing benevolence, choosing to be conscious about the choices that you're making and how that will play out long term, and not getting kind of pulled into the illusion that you have power over another, because it is such a strong illusion in some parts of our culture. This idea that you can control and manipulate another for your own means, and that will play out in your favor, and that you'll be happy as a result of that. And this is a hybrid orchid, and we'll do pink fairy orchid on its own in a bit, and we've already done cowslip orchid. So I'm going to get you to cast your memory back to last section and try and remember what cowslip orchid was for. And pink fairy is, I'm just going to fast forward here. So this is pink fairy, this is what it looks like. Isn't it sweet? And that is carrying inner peace. So that's all we're going to talk about. I'll do the rest later. So it's a combination of the two ideas. So what you have is this inner sense of peace, and it becomes a well of strength that you can rely on when you feel overwhelmed by a situation. So that feeling of being overwhelmed can kind of play out in lots of different ways. So it may be the need to filter judgments and strengthen who you understand to be yourself. And I mean self with like a capital S. Who you are in the innermost part of your being. When all the masks are taken away, when all the games are gone, who is it that you intrinsically are? And so this is kind of about the inner strength that's required to really understand that aspect of self. And it's not always going to be an easy journey to understand self. It's not always going to be, as one of my mentors once put it, it's not all going to be beer and Skittles, the journey toward that understanding. There are aspects of self that we want desperately to reject. There are aspects of self that are dark and that are as Jung would say, the shadow self, or when you look at different storytelling, like different human archetype storytelling throughout the ages, there's always storytelling about the dark aspect of self and really reclaiming it and loving it. And so this is part of that. And how people express that is going to be very different. So some people may feel overwhelmed or oversensitive. Some people may feel highly emotional and may go through a seesaw of expressions in that way. Some people may be reacting to the external world because it's mirroring aspects of self that perhaps they're not comfortable with. So that's why there are lots of different ways that this presents, but the overall lesson, the overall healing comes about through promoting inner strength. So having the stability and resilience to understand who you are and to feel very grounded in that and very comfortable in that, despite the external influences telling you this is the way it should be. And leafless orchid. This is a really unique doctrine of signatures. The first thing that stands out for me is that everything, all of the external petals are very plain and they all point to the very center. There's a lot going on in the center. There's a lot of color, there's a lot of movement, there's an unusual shape, but the focus really is in the center, and that's what this essence is for. It's for centralizing your energy and focus, to maintain a sense of well-being, to maintain wholeness, to maintain your essential energy. So this is for when you can get so focused on peripheral concerns that really, generally, you have no control over whatsoever. And the external focus fragments your focus, fragments your energy. And this is in essence for kind of bringing it all back in, so you don't get drained. And we talked a little bit about those in the healing profession sometimes have this tendency to want desperately to help, but haven't necessarily checked why that is, and get caught up in essentially power plays where they are giving and giving and giving in order to receive validation that they're enough, that they're lovable, that they're whatever. And so leafless orchid can be for moments where people are drained. You know, they feel like, I've been giving and giving and giving, and now I'm dried up. I've got nothing left to give. So think of burnout, think of exhaustion, think of tired and depleted, but where the energy has been really sent off in all directions. And this is to kind of bring it all in, and to understand what wholeness is, to understand what balance is, and to truly respect the need for balance, the need to refill the well instead of continuously giving. This is a sweet little flower. So we talked about pink fairy orchid for 5 seconds as being carrying in a piece. That's probably more like 1 second, isn't it? So this little flower, when I look at the picture, I see there's such a sweetness to it. There's such a peace. When I look at this flower, there's softness and there's a lightness to it. And this is for maintaining strength, similar to the hybrid flower. It's also for inner serenity and equipoise, and it's to be able to be in that state, be able to be very centered, despite a total storm going on around you, despite triggers that may happen, which may kind of push every button within you that wants to trigger that reaction, you know, that familiar reaction, and the way that we kind of emotionally maybe fly off the handle in a situation. That's very human and very, very normal. But you can consciously choose a different path. Perhaps not every time, but this flower is like a reminder to kind of come back to that place of inner peace. And it's one of the reasons that people do things like yoga, for example. I'll give that as an example. So you're doing all of these crazy postures, and you're breathing weirdly, and you're in a pretzel shape, and it's not very comfortable. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it's bloody uncomfortable, and your mind is going all over the place. And the idea is that despite the chaos that's going on in the body, despite the chaos that's going on in the breath, you can find that center point of peace. So the idea is that eventually, in that posture, you can come back to your breath, or you can come back to a still mind. And it's a way to teach the body to keep coming back to the center, that even though kind of things can be falling down around you, you don't have to be dragged into that drama. You can still remain in your kind of that space of inner peace, and let things kind of get very crazy around you. And it's not really about being separate. It's not really about saying, well, I don't want to have to deal with life, so I'm just going to withdraw completely and pretend that that's a very spiritual place to be in. And perhaps that's your journey and that's what's right. But this flower is more about that you can maintain that peace but still be very much a part of the world. And as therapists, this is a beautiful lesson to learn. It's a beautiful gift to be able to give. Isn't this beautiful? Purple enamel orchid. And they call it enamel orchid because look at that shine that comes off it. It kind of looks a bit fake. It looks a bit like it's got hairspray all over it and it's sitting perfectly, And there's such a glow to it. There's such a shine and shimmer, and it's very showy. The color is vibrant. It's a flower with like a lot of energy. You can kind of see it being, for me, this is a little off track, but I see it like a show flower, like on stage, kind of in its element, being in full energy and just being able to give that. That was really off track, wasn't it? Maybe it looks nothing like that to you. This essence is a living essence, and it is used for trying to maintain energy. So this is really useful for people who are prone to kind of doing a lot and cramming as much into their life as they can, and then kind of collapsing, whether that's nervous system collapse or whether that's mentally overwhelmed or kind of emotionally just falling apart. It's that erraticness that is important with this flower, and it's a wonderful lesson to be able to recognize that kind of giving your all does not necessarily mean doing everything, saying yes to everything. Sometimes it's about kind of making a choice and then saying no to other things, and then directing all of your energy into that choice with 100% commitment, 2 feet in. And that may be the best way that you can do your work in the world, is to consciously say, this is what needs to happen. These additional things would be lovely, but this is why I'm here. This is what's going to best serve me, and this is how I can best serve others. So purple enamel is about dropping the need to please others, dropping the need to prove oneself to others, and just going, this is what I need to be doing right now. This is what's right for me. So it helps really with controlling the that kind of wave of energy that people can ride through. Little rabbit orchid. You can kind of see why this one has the name rabbit orchid, with big long ears there, looking a bit like a rabbit. And what else can you see with this flower? Obviously those has little ears kind of really a focal point. They're a beautiful color, they really stand out. And you have almost like this, like a white bib underneath supporting the flower. And then you have this center, which compared to some of the others is actually quite closed. It's almost like it's got a little vessel that it's safeguarding in the middle there. It's protecting. And rabbit orchid, in some ways, may be similar to agrimony from the beige flower remedies, if you remember back that far, which was the unmasking of the soul. It was, beige called it, the mask remedy. And to me, the two are sort of similar in that way, that we learn through various social situations that we need a mask. You know, we need to behave in this way in this situation, this way in another situation. And in doing that, we kind of cover up our true self. And there can come all kinds of stories around that, like, well, I should be ashamed of my true self, or my true self will be rejected if I sit in it, or it's not enough, it's not lovable, it's not this, it's not that. Because we've been taught that a mask is the most appropriate way to move forward. So this is about really the incredible leap of faith that is required when people are in this story, that I am inherently enough, that I will be loved regardless. And so the ways that this may present are things like superficial relationships, not letting people too close for fear that they will discover some horrible secret and reject. And red beak orchid. This is an unusual looking flower, yes? So have a think about the doctrinal signatures. We've got a very social looking flower, for example. We've got a flower that is a unique color, and also a flower that is kind of drooping. It looks like it's tired. Yeah, it looks like, oh, I've had enough. And yet you can see that, I mean, those flowers are coming straight from the ground. There's such groundedness to this flower. There's such strength to that stem that's holding all of these flowers. You know, there's actually a lot of strength there, despite the flowers looking tired. So this has been used in the Living Essence range for kind of embracing wholeness when somebody's just uninspired by life. You know, they're in that phase where life is just a constant battle. You know, to get out of bed in the morning, what's the point? Or there's constant struggle in day-to-day life. There's in conflict, or and this may not be external conflict, this may be internal conflict as well. And there's a frustration usually with responsibility. So they've kind of gotten to a phase where the inspiration for the original goal is gone, and we're left with the reality and responsibility of the choices that have been made. And it's not a fun place anymore. And so this is the excitement, the drive that's needed to become enthusiastic again about life situation, about choices that have been made. Shy blue orchid. This is a stunning picture, so that helps. But I haven't really seen a picture of shy blue orchid that doesn't look like this. It is open. Its little, could you say, head, face, the bit in the middle, is facing up. So the energy is up, you know, it kind of radiating out. It has that the stunning heavenly blue color there on the outside, and then it looks like it radiates light in the middle. And most of the pictures they see of shy blue orchid are like this. It looks radiant, and it's kind of moving through. Everything's up with this picture, with this little flower. And in the Living Essences, it's used for breaking through. So breaking through patterns that no longer serve, breaking through things that seem to be holding you back, from moving forward with your goals. And this may be something like weight loss. That may be a goal, and there's just stuff that keeps holding you back. It may be your own stuff, or it may be external stuff that's holding you back. It may be emotional, or it may be mental. It may be self-sabotage, whatever's going on. And this is just kind of breaking all of that, all of those roadblocks up, so that you feel the strength to really move through with your goal. And I really like this line: it's internal, inspiring, and subtle, benefiting those dedicated to the path of light. Next is Start Spider Orchid. And this is about directness in communication predominantly. So having the courage to say, wow, this is a messy situation. This is a difficult and uncomfortable situation. But to move through appropriately, I need to be in my truth. And I need a direct and honest approach here. I need to accept what's happening, but sit in my strength and kind of be firm in how I approach this situation. So this is for people who tend to avoid confrontations in general, to create peace. But of course it's kind of the illusion of peace. And White Spider Orchid. So yeah, the one before it was Start Spider Orchid, and you can tell that these sort of look a little bit similar. But remember the color white. And white we spoke about purity, and we spoke about spirituality, and we spoke about calmness. And we jokingly spoke about it not being a color. White Spider Orchid in Living Essences is used for sustaining and maintaining unconditional love. So where perhaps your role is that of a humanitarian. Perhaps it's your role in life to give unconditionally. And that may be for a loved one, like in a caregiver situation, or it may be for the world at large. You know, you may have the desire to keep moving forward to look for world peace, for example. So what can happen sometimes with people who are called to that humanitarian aspect of life is that it can become really overwhelming, and it can stop them from doing their job. It can all seem too much. And that level of love also brings with it a level of sensitivity and vulnerability. And that can be overwhelming at times, and it can freeze someone in their tracks, and they can not know how to move forward and change the situation for the better. So this is to help those who suffer, and to recognize. I heard a beautiful quote that was by the Dalai Lama, who said, "The heart has the capacity to bear the unbearable." And that symbolizes this lesson of this flower for me. You know, the heart may seem like a very vulnerable space to be in, but there is an incredible strength in love. Some would say that it is the strongest that we have. The strongest power that we have is love. And that's the lesson of this flower. So just wrapping up with the orchids, what we found was But doctrine of signature wise, there are a lot of different types of orchids. And so in that same way, there are going to be similarities and quite a few differences. I've chosen one difference to highlight, which was the cowslip orchid, and we talked about that last section, so I'm not going to go into that again now. But the similarities, they address the way the intellect interferes with energy levels and heartfelt connections with others, and they inspire change through gentle uplifting and higher perspective. And indeed, some people have argued that if orchids are one of the only essences that are found on every continent, that perhaps they're assisting in kind of moving people forward evolution-wise to that higher perspective. So that's just a thought, just a theory. So with the doctrine of signatures, they don't flower frequently, but when they do, they make quite a show and quite a statement. And there's like, they have that tuber aspect. So there's an aspect where they kind of go underground and they kind of remain dormant, and then all of a sudden they show up, and it's a spectacular show. And that's a really interesting doctrine of signatures, combined with the fact that they live in some quite hostile environments, and they live all over the world except for Antarctica. So there's a survivalness, there's a tenacity with these flowers, there's an incredible strength with these flowers. And I like this last point, and you may or may not agree. The flower can be symbolic of breaking through rigid patterns to reveal a very different aspect of the plant's character. The flowers are so stunning, usually, in comparison to the plant. And you can see the plant there, that picture there, it's wonderful. It can look a bit scraggly and a bit uninspiring. And then the flower is divine, really. So unique. I hope you enjoy the orchids.